Channel 2S is brought to you by New Type HQ. Get your kits and supplies at the link in the description below. Hello and welcome everyone back to Channel 2S. We just did an episode of Gunpla News yesterday talking about some new Bandai model kits. However, today we're shifting gears a little bit and looking at some Gundam figures. I know this isn't everyone's cup of tea, but Tamashii Nations just showed off a ton of really cool figures. So even if you aren't normally a figure person, there's enough really cool obscure stuff here that's probably not going to get a kit for a very long time that it's still worth taking a look. So this is Tamashii Nations' 2022 event, and if you're not familiar with Tamashii Nations, I should probably give you guys a little bit of a warning ahead of time. Tamashii Nations does things a little bit differently than Bandai Hobby when it comes to their new product announcements. Instead of showing you just a few kits or figures that they're working on right now that are going to be available in the next few months, they basically lay all their cards out on the table and show you absolutely everything they are currently working on, everything they might be working on, and everything they're going to be working on in the future. So a lot of the figures we're looking at tonight will probably not be coming out for a very long time, and more still may never come out at all. There's a long list of products that Tamashii Nations has shown off at these events in the past that have never come to fruition. With that in mind, let's take a look at the Tamashii Nations 2022 Tokyo event, starting with SH Figuarts and Robot Tamashii. Starting off with the figure arts, we do have the lovely Suletta here that we have already seen quite a bit of already. She's not really a new reveal, however, I believe the Mirine next to her is a brand new figure announcement. I've not had any first-hand experience with the Suletta figure. In fact, I'm not even sure it's out yet. I don't think it is. However, they appear to be of decent quality, which is good news since Tamashii Nations' anime-style SH Figuarts tend to be a bit hit or miss. SH Figuarts is very good at making figures of live-action characters, especially armored characters from tokusatsu shows, but they are not always the best when it comes to anime-style characters. That's more of Figma's domain. However, both of these figures I think do a very good job of capturing the characters' likenesses, and they look like pretty fun figures overall. And just to reinforce what I said earlier, you'll notice that the name card here for the figure does not give a release date and does not give a price, because this is a figure they are currently working on that they don't really have official confirmation for its full release info for yet. And this is going to be the case for a lot of the figures we're looking at tonight, so just remember, if you see something cool here that you like, you might be waiting a while for it. Here we have kind of a surprising choice, which is a Robot Tamashii anime edition of Guels de Lanza. Now, this is kind of surprising seeing as we saw this thing get completely destroyed, what, 1-2 episodes into the show? So to be making a figure of it now, I feel like is kind of pointless. I guess if you want to recreate one specific scene from one episode of the anime, it's kind of cool, but who knows? Maybe this will get released, maybe it won't. Maybe Guels de Lanza will show up again later on in the show and we'll have another reason to pick this up. We've also got an effect part expansion set for the existing Robot Tamashii anime Gundam Aerial. This gives you some funnel stands as well as some effect parts for those funnels, and while I think they make a good effort, I'm not sure how much I like this as a display method for the Aerial. It looks okay, but something about the way these effect parts are designed just doesn't mesh with how I feel like these bits looked in the anime. I get what they're going for, but it doesn't really sell the effect as much as I think they were hoping. Got another Robot Tamashii anime edition here, this time being the Gundam Ferract, looking pretty cool. I don't know if there's really much of an incentive to get this over the high grade. I found the high grades tend to be pretty accurate, but with the generally cheaper construction and lower build quality of some of the newer high grades from Bandai, it might be maybe nice to go with the Robot Tamashis if you want a more durable figure. While Robot Tamashis do tend to be a little bit on the expensive side, that might be a price some people are willing to pay just to not have to deal with the clip joints. Here you can also see that extra booster pack for Space Combat for the Gundam Aerial. Again, no real confirmed release date for this, they're just showing off that it's a thing they could make if they like. So immediately, what went through my head when I first saw this picture was, wow, this guy's completely scratch-built Gundam Aerial actually has a decent likeness to the show. That's really impressive for a fan creation. And then I realized this is an official figure. Now, when you see a Gundam figure that looks as absolutely scuffed as this thing does, you know there's only one line that it can belong to, and that is, of course, Gundam Universe. Yes, that's right, guys. Everyone's favorite American-designed Gundam anime action figure line is back. Once again, showing that Bandai Japan has very little understanding of what international audiences actually want. Now, sure, it is cool to see regular $20 to $25 Gundam action figures on store shelves. However, a lot of the really extreme redesigns they've done for this series have tended to be misses more than they have been hits, and unfortunately, I think the Aerial's another miss. Some people might like this, but it is just not doing it for me at all. That is a seriously scuffed looking design. Now the Aerial's wave mates are going to be the Togis 2, which is one of the few mold reuses we've gotten out of this line, which is actually one of its more impressive aspects, is that usually with these type of 6-inch figure lines, you're going to see a lot of tooling reused, a lot of repaints, a lot of retools. We haven't really gotten a lot of that with Gundam Universe. So it is cool to see them reusing the Togis mold, since this is one of, from what I understand, one of the better figures from the Gundam Universe line, and the Togis 2 is something that you can't actually get at retail retail, meaning that this is a figure that a lot of people are actually going to have an incentive to go out and buy. You know, if you're a Gundam Wing fan and you really want a Togeki's 2, but you don't want to pay P Bandai money for one, this might be a legitimate alternative. So good on you, Gundam Universe. You actually made something cool. And I think this is really the direction that Gundam Universe should focus on in the future if they want to get more people interested in their figures. Make the stuff that's either hard to get as Gunpla or doesn't exist as Gunpla. Because when it comes to a value comparison between a high-grade Gunpla and a Gundam Universe figure, the high grade's going to win every single time. Final member of the wave is the Barbatos Rex, and unfortunately, I think this guy might have ended up the worst out of the bunch. Once again, the Gundam Universe line proves to be unable to properly capture the Barbatos' design, and with how bizarrely squared off and boxy this one is looking, I am not feeling this thing at all. Only way I could see this being somewhat worth picking up is if you are just absolutely completely averse to painting and you want a roughly high-grade sized Barbatos that has all the color apps intact, because the high grade did not do a very good job of that. Moving back to Robot Tamashii, we have a really wild variant of the Phantom Gundam that I don't think I've ever seen before. This is called the Phantom Gundam V2, and it has a freaking old school beam prop plane propeller on the front of the plane mode. And if this isn't the most insane thing I've ever seen in Gundam, I don't know what is. There is some real wild shit in late UC when it comes to just the really insanely creative beam weaponry we have, and I have definitely never seen this variant before. Now, looking at him in robot mode, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a variant. I think all they did was just make this new section for the front, but man, that is a really cool accessory. Unfortunately, like everything else we've looked at so far, we have no real way of knowing when this is going to be released. And it should also be worth noting before any of you guys get your hopes up that what we're looking at here is probably going to be a pretty healthy mix of retail and premium Bandai releases, so just because you see something cool here doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a retail release. Speaking of cool though, let's talk about the Anchor, because I love how this figure looks. The Anchor is one of those designs from Crossbone that I've never really paid a lot of attention to, even though I was aware it exists, and man, this figure just does such a cool job of selling it for me. I love the light asymmetry of the design, I love his giant Guilty Gear style anchor axe weapon, and he's got some really sick beam effects too. Not only do you have this one for his ammo belt attached axe sword that he has for some reason, but you get a massive beam blade effect for the Anchor, and this is such a cool display piece. I'm not much of a figure collector when it comes to Gundam, but this one is really, really tempting. So here's a cool design that I don't think I've ever really talked about on the channel before. So when they did that redesign of the new Gundam with the long-range fin funnel for the 1:1 scale statue, a little while later they actually did a similar redesign for the Sazabi. And this was done originally, I believe it was done for the Gundam Breaker mobile game, so there'd be some sort of counterpart to the new Gundam. And basically all that was different about this version of the Sazabi is it had a pair of giant beam weapons on the back that could be detached and used as arm-mounted weapons. Now this was a pretty cool variant, but as far as I know, up until now, it was only exclusively seen in various games and other pieces of media. So it's pretty cool to finally be seeing it as a physical figure. Okay, so this is the part where they open the Gundam Seed floodgates and absolutely drown us with Cosmic Era figures. So first up here, we have something really surprising, and that is a pilot suit figure of Kira Yamato. Now this is really cool because we really don't get a lot of articulated figures of actual Gundam pilots. We get the Gundams a lot, but we really don't get a lot of merch when it comes to the pilots themselves. Now this is not the first time that SH Figuarts has tried making pilot figures in the past. They had released a Domon Kashu and Master Asia figure quite a while ago, and there was also a point in time where they had a Char Aznable prototype that they were showing off at various conventions, but as is unfortunately the case sometimes with Tamashii Nations, that figure never saw release. Now I'm not exactly the biggest Kira Yamato fan, as is honestly the case with a lot of people in the English-speaking Gundam fandom, but I am very excited for what this could potentially mean in the future if we're now getting SH Figuarts of Gundam pilots. Given how massively popular Gundam Seed is in Japan, this figure is probably going to sell pretty well if they release it, and that could bode very well for future pilot figures. Something really cool they're doing with this figure is they're actually giving you his entire cockpit seat that you can use as a display base. Now when this figure eventually releases, I have no idea if this is going to be an accessory it comes with, or if there's going to be some sort of deluxe edition that includes the chair. But either way, putting this next to a Strike Gundam makes for a pretty awesome display. Here we have a bunch more figures for the Robot Tamashii anime line, all hailing from Gundam Seed. One of the things I like about the anime subline is it goes into all sorts of cool variants and figures that we didn't really get as Gunpla. Now sure, obviously they do all the basic mainline stuff. They give us our Strike Gundam, they give us our basic Jin, but then they go in and they give us all the cool variants as well. So we've got a really nice looking long range Jin. Here you can see him looking pretty awesome, looking pretty cool. A very simple, very basic looking figure, but that is the whole point of the anime line, is that they are as anime accurate as they can possibly be, so it kind of makes sense. Then we have this totally not a Zeon Aquatic mobile suit looking guy that I believe is called the Goon. I'm not super good with Cosmic Era mobile suit names, but this guy is definitely something that we've never gotten as a proper graded figure before, although I believe it had a no grade in the original Seed line. As far as merch of this particular design goes, this is definitely the best it's ever looked. So if you're a fan of this one specific aquatic mobile suit from Gundam Seed, this figure is going to be a must-have for you. And then we have this, I believe this is the Jin training type, or maybe it's called the Jin Ochre. There's actually a surprising number of Jin variants in Gundam Seed. I think it's a pretty cool color scheme. It's kind of a neat design. Seagyu here is looking as awesome as it always does. This is actually one of my favorite grunt suit designs from Gundam Seed, and this thing looks so much better than the old high grade. Honestly, a lot of these Gundam Seed anime figures are worth it just for the improved proportions. But of course, the improved paintwork, detail, and color separation doesn't hurt either. Not to mention their fantastic level of articulation. We've also got some ground type units here with the Bukyu, as well as its cooler older brother, the Legao. On the 8th MS team side of things, we also have one of my favorite Zeon mobile suit variants, the Goof Flight type. Now, I'm probably not going to pick this up because I think the high grade is more than good enough, and I'd rather track one of those down than pick this figure up, but it is a pretty cool looking figure if you want to go all in on the Robot Tamashii anime line. Okay, then we have this guy. I've never seen this variant before. It's called the Gunner type Zaku, but man, this thing looks cool. They pull out all the stops when it comes out to some of these MSV variants, and they give us some insane stuff we've never seen as kits before. So this is a different variant of the Zaku. This is called the Zaku Rangefinder. It looks like it's based off the Zaku FZ as kind of its base mold, and then it's got a Goof custom shoulder cannon. Actually, now that I look at this is probably something you could kit bash yourself out of Gunpla parts. Would make for a pretty cool custom. Man, the proportions on that Robot Tamashii version of the Zaku F2 are really interesting. I hope I didn't call this the FZ earlier. This is the Zaku F2 in case I misspoke there. It's got like a really broad chest and shoulders. Very, very powerful looking Zaku. Alright, Gerba Tetra Custom. This is not something I was expecting from the anime line. I think they did. Was that cost signature? I seem to remember there being a Robot Tamashii cost signature of this from a very long time ago, but I guess it's popular enough that they're remaking it for the anime line. I love the color scheme on this thing. I think the extra added white, in addition to the red of the normal Gerber Tetra, really helps elevate the design. Oh, here it is. GP00 Blossom. I love this design. Always wanted a kit of it. If we don't see one in the future, I might have to pick this figure up because this is one of the best looking Blossoms I think I've ever seen. Just look at that thing. What a cool looking figure. It's going to be such a shame if this doesn't get released. We got Seema's Gelgoog Marine, and this thing, man, the high grade does this design so dirty because they picked the worst possible colors for it. The high grade literally looks like it's made out of puke, but every other painted build I've seen, every figure I've seen of it makes these colors look so much better. Right out of the box, if you're not willing to do any paintwork to it, this is a much better looking Gelgoog Marine. And with how absolutely ancient the high grade is, that's not the only way this thing is vastly superior. It's got great proportions, great articulation, no seam lines. If you want Seema's Gelgoog Marine, this is definitely the figure to get. So I can't find a name tag for this thing, which is confusing me a little bit because I can't tell if this is a Gelgoog Marine or a Gelgoog Jaeger. I want to say it's a Gelgoog Marine because it's in with the Stardust Memory suits, but some of the parts of this design, like the chest and the shoulders, really reminding me of the Jaeger. Either way though, this is a really cool looking figure. Alright, so now we're moving into the bigger premium items, our metal builds, our fixed figuration metal composites. First off, we have this absolutely insane looking fixed figuration Death Scythe Hell that looks like something straight out of a resin kit company. I almost can't believe this is an official figure made by Bandai because this thing looks absolutely ridiculous. This is like one of those absolutely insane builds you see in the finals for a Gunpla Builders World Cup. I don't even want to think about how much this figure is going to cost when it releases, but man does it look cool. I'm not the biggest fan of the EW version of the Death Scythe Hell. I've always preferred the TV design, but this figure sells me on it so hard. Of all the things we've looked at so far, of all the cool stuff we've seen that didn't have any confirmation as to whether or not we're actually getting it, one of the few things that we actually have a confirmed release date and price for of everything here is the biggest, stupidest, most insanely ridiculous, no way they would ever release this product I think I've ever seen from Tamashii Nations. And that is a metal build of the goddamn GN arms. Of all the things they could make, they are making this absolute monster of a vehicle. And yes, of course it combines with the metal build Exia. This is an absolutely enormous piece of metal and plastic. I don't even want to think about how much this thing would weigh. Probably weighs more than an actual child. Here it is with the Exia absolutely dwarfing what is already a pretty darn big kit. I mean, these metal builds are basically the size of a master grade, so that should give you a pretty big idea of how massive this figure is. So it's coming out in June of next year for almost $600, or what would be almost $600 if the yen wasn't in the toilet right now. If you get past what is probably going to be very high shipping costs to get this things into the US, this is going to be an absolutely killer display piece. Then we have another variant of the Metal Build Exia because Bandai just keeps making these. They've kind of been shuffling around parts between the different Metal Build figures to try and get more revenue out of what I'm sure is some very expensive tooling for them to make, so it's totally understandable. It does make these figures look very kit bashy and kind of gives me the feeling that I could just make this myself with the master grades. But if you think this design looks cool and you're baller enough to pick one up, it's a pretty cool display piece. I mean, just look at how big that sword is. They basically gave him one of the GN arms as a weapon. Then we have a Metal Build version of the Lightning Striker pack. They're not showing it on an actual Strike Gundam, but you can get a general idea of what it's like. Here's another Striker pack I don't think I've ever seen before. It's called the Divine Striker. The color scheme and the design of it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Testament Gundam. In fact, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I realize I can see some little claws down here in the front, so I think this might actually be the weapon pack for the Testament Gundam. In which case, we might have a Metal Build Testament coming out down the line, which would be not something that I would ever be able to afford, but man, that would be such a cool figure. Here we have a Metal Build Providence. I feel like they've at the very least teased this thing before, so I don't think this is the first time we've ever seen it, but it's still a pretty awesome looking figure. Tons of detail, tons of beautiful paintwork. If you're not someone who's super crazy about painting, but you got some extra money and you want an awesome display piece, you really can't go wrong with the Metal Build line. The hardest part though is actually getting a hold of one because these things sell out insanely fast. Moving on to the fixed figuration line, this is another line that has a lot of die-cast elements, except I don't believe these are quite as expensive as Metal Builds. These are more closer to like 150, 160, so still expensive, but not quite as expensive. Here though, we've got Sliger's GM, and this is only the first of several different Doan's Island figures we're going to be looking at today. It's a pretty clean looking design. I like the paintwork on this. I like the decaling. I like the colors. I like the finish. Overall, the fixed figuration figures have a really nice, really impressive look out of the box. Here we got just a regular old Zaku 1 from the same line, looking as cool as a Zaku 1 can look. Then we have some sort of light up deluxe figure of the walking Gundam statue. I'm sure some people are going to buy this, but it's definitely not something that has me particularly excited. All right, so here's where things get really, really cool. So we're shifting over to Metal Robot Spirits now, which is like regular Robot Spirits, but they have die-cast elements in them. And they're doing something really, really cool, which is they're making more of those un-SD-ified SD Gundams. So we're getting real types of some Gundams that I don't think I've even seen before in real type style designs. So first here we have, Gundam Aquarius. This is a really cool design that I've always wanted to see a modern SD of because the only one we have is really old, but seeing it in full real type proportions, I think this is even cooler than getting a new SD of it. This is a really awesome design. I love the colors. I love the look of it. It's just a really unique looking Gundam. I would love to collect these Metal Robot Spirits figures because there's some really awesome looking figures in this line. Here we have a very mundane looking Hazel that I'm sure all the AOZ fans are going to go absolutely nuts for. And here we have an add-on weapon set for the existing Metal Robot Spirits Wound Wart. And yes, we actually do have a Metal Robot Spirits Wound Wart. Alright, so the label for this one says Full Armor Hyakushiki Kai. Very obviously, this is not the Hyakushiki Kai. This is, I think it's called I can't remember if it's called like the Demon Gundam or the Satan Gundam or something like that. I don't think I've ever seen this design in real type before. I think it's still a little too goofy. The horns especially are really killing the design for me. And then we have a real type Knight Superior Dragon. Now, I feel like we might have gotten a figure or two of this in the past, but this one is probably going to be a lot more affordable than whatever we've gotten before, because I don't think we've ever gotten like a normal retail release of this. And even if this is P Bandai, even if it is, because these Metal Robot Tamashii figures are usually around like 150-ish in price, I'm pretty sure that's a lot less than whatever the last figure was, so this might still be the best way to get a hold of this design. Then we have the Command Gundam, looking absolutely awesome. I feel like the closest we've really ever gotten to this was that Command Quanta from the Gundam Builders, what was it, Gundam Breaker Battlelog? I think it was Gundam Breaker Battlelog that had the Command Quanta, and that's kind of similar to this, but this is just a full-on, super accurate Command Gundam in its full real-type glory, looking absolutely awesome. Man, I can't remember the last time I saw one of these shadow boxes, but I remember Bandai used to use these for a lot of new kits and figures. I remember this is how they announced the high-grade Force Impulse. This is how they showed off a bunch of the Re-100s. Man, I wish they'd bring this back. This was such a cool way to build up hype. Oh, the article here is saying this is a metal build camphor, in which case, yes please, I would love to see a metal build of the camphor. Metal build figures are way outside of my price range normally, but if they make the camphor look good, with this being one of my favorite Zeon mobile suits of all time, I might be about to make a really bad financial decision, who knows. Here we got a nice looking cost signature of the new Gundam. This is a very this is a very nice looking figure, actually. I'm not really a fan of the new Gundam Veracod generally. I think the Master Grade was really over detailed, but there's something about this figure that I find a lot more appealing. It's like they just found this perfect balance between the more anime accurate design and the more detailed Katoki design, and they blended them together in a way that actually looks good. I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather have a figure that looks like this than something that looks like the Master Grade Veracod. Only problem I'm seeing here is that, as is unfortunately the trend with a lot of new Gundam figures nowadays and models, they are not giving you any fin funnels, which kind of sucks because that should not be an upsell. That should be a basic part of the new Gundam's loadout. Looks like we got a similar figure here for the high new Gundam. Now, we did get a metal robot spirits for this relatively recently, so I'm not sure why they're redoing the high new Gundam, but I guess there's probably going to be something special about this one, but quite frankly, I'm not super hyped for it. Hyakushiki's kind of cool though. That's a nice looking figure, and the best thing about the Hyakushiki is not only we're getting the base model, we're also getting the upgrades. So here we got the Hyakushiki Kai, looking a little bit cooler, And then we have my favorite version of the Hyakushiki, the full armor Hyakushiki, looking a lot cooler. I was really surprised to see this guy in Super Robot Wars 30 because the game doesn't actually have the base Hyakushiki. This is just the mobile suit that you have Char in for basically the whole game. As soon as you unlock Char/Quattro, you just immediately have this mobile suit. So now we're moving into the Gundam fixed figuration metal composites, and this is what I was talking about earlier when I said we'd be seeing more Doan's Island figures. So we got the ground type Zaku from that movie. I don't know if we're going to get all the variants of it, but we definitely got this one. We've also got Char's High Mobility Zaku, again hailing from Doan's Island. This is in the same metal composite fixed figuration line as the previous figure, so he's going to have some die-cast metal parts, a nice premium matte finish paint job, and lots of paint and detailing work done to him. In a similar vein, we got a good old-fashioned Goof here, looking like a very regular Goof, and I believe that is actually going to do it. Huh, okay. So we just went through a massive pile of figures. I'm sure everyone's got their own favorites, so be sure to leave them down in the comments below. I want to know which figures you saw here that you thought were the coolest looking. When it comes to the Robot Tamashii anime line, this is one of those figure lines that Gunpla fans really shouldn't be sleeping on as much as they do. Yes, I know they're not model kits and you can't build them, but there are some really awesome figures in that line that have a lot to offer that you can't get from Gunpla. So thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed. As always, thank you to my patrons, especially my Master Grade tier patron Yank. If you want to help support the channel as well, there's a Patreon link down in the description below. Would be much appreciated, although as always, it is totally optional. If you liked the video in general, please do leave a like and subscribe for more Gunpla news and other content related to Gunpla news that's probably going to be a lot more frequent than Gunpla news because Bandai barely releases anything nowadays. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm your host, Second Soundwave, and as always, I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.